Hello my dear friends, you're in the military summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 20th of July of 2026. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first let's talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. And during the previous 12 hours we received lots of updates that Zelensky is going to dismiss the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrskyi. So this is one of the most important pieces of news of the previous 24 hours. Syrskyi may lose his position in coming hours, maybe even minutes, and maybe even by the time you watch this video, Syrskyi would be already dismissed. Ukrainian media, citing sources in President Zelensky's office, report that today commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Syrskyi, may be dismissed. Other outlets claim that the decision has already been made and will be announced officially during the day. Syrskyi has served as commander-in-chief since February 2024, when he replaced Valery Zaluzhny. Prior to that, he was the commander of the Ukrainian ground forces for 5 years. So basically, this is the first article that was published on this matter, and later different independent sources were making different statements and different making updates about the situation. The public's concerns have been heard. The situation is being resolved professionally, constructively, and in the best interests of our state. These are the words of Budanov. Furthermore, we have more different sources, different channels, different social medias were publishing different statements about this situation, but all of them were saying just about one thing, that Syrskyi most likely would be dismissed during the 20th of July of 2026 or during the next 24 hours. The president of Ukraine, Zelensky, was forced to make this decision and was forced to be involved into the situation because Ukraine was falling into protests. And this is a very dangerous situation. There is a war. There is a very big war between Russia and Ukraine. And protests through Ukraine is the last thing that Zelensky needs and Ukraine needs. So that is why Zelensky was forced to start acting. And this is the most important situation because it's not just to dismiss another general or another officer. This is Syrskyi, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine. He's a very strong political person, and you cannot dismiss Syrskyi if you don't have your people behind you. So that is why during the previous 12 hours, Zelensky had lots of meetings with commanders, with the most strongest persons in the military of Ukraine. He had a meeting with Oleg Apostol. He's the head of Marine and Storm troops and forces of the armed forces of Ukraine. Furthermore, he had a meeting with Mikhailo Drapati. He is the commander of joint forces of the armed forces of Ukraine. Also, he had a meeting with Vladimir Gorbatyuk. He's deputy head of the chief of the general staff of the armed forces of Ukraine. He's not the chief of the general staff. He's a deputy. Further, he had a meeting with Igor Obolensky. He is the head of Kharkiv Corps. Also, he had a meeting with Beletsky and with Denis Prokopenko-Redis. So the most important thing that you need to understand that he was talking with them not to suggest them or to propose them the chair of the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Syrskyi, and so on. He was talking with them about one thing. He was talking about loyalty. And the only question Zelensky was asking these commanders was, if I make the decision, if I decide to dismiss Syrskyi, whom you gonna support, me or Syrskyi? As of the end of the 20th of July of 2026, we don't know for sure what exactly these commanders told Zelensky, whether they shown their loyalty to him or they told him to wait a little bit because today is not the best time when when Zelensky can dismiss the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Syrskyi, because currently the most important battle of the special military operation begins. And we are talking about the battle battle between the cities of Slaviansk and Druzhkivka. So the entire conflict, basically the military hot phase of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, started in 2014 with the battles for the cities of Kramatorsk and Slaviansk. These two cities used to be, let's say, under control of rebellions, of rebels of Donbass, but during the 2014s, the armed forces of Ukraine managed to recapture these cities, and that was something, a very big victory for Ukraine. And now we see that everything returned to the starting point, and this is a very important battle, not just for the cities. This is the battle for hearts, for Ukrainians, and for minds. And of course, it is not a very good idea, according to my understanding of the situation, to replace the only person who understands the defense operation of the Slaviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration right in front of the beginning of this battle. So maybe these commanders were saying the same thing and were telling Zelensky the same thing, that it's better to wait for a month or two when the battle begins, when everybody understands what is going to happen next. But telling the truth, the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, doesn't have this time, because protests are brewing, and every single day more and more people join these protest activities, which means that at some point, if the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Ukraine, Syrskyi, is not being changed, then the protesters can change their demands and can start demanding the replacement even of the president of Ukraine, Zelensky. Another important thing, and probably the most important thing of the previous 24 hours, when all these updates about meetings with generals and commanders were published, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine and the Ukrainian General Staff issued a statement saying that information circulating about the dismissal of Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi is false, and that Syrskyi continues to perform his duties as normal. This is a very important statement. This is the statement that was made basically by the Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine, Syrskyi himself, and he said, and he told Zelensky, that I'm not going to lose my position, and if I lose my position, then most likely too many people will lose their positions as well. So my task is to fight along the line of combat contact, and your task is to fight for my reputation. So this is the current situation in political sphere of Ukraine, a very difficult situation. The Russians are about to begin the major battle for Druzhkivka, Slaviansk, and we are at the situation when Ukrainians may change the only person who understands the battle itself and who understands the defense mission and defense operation of the Slaviansk-Druzhkivka, because Syrskyi and the commander-in-chief were the only people who were developing this operation and who knew how exactly this operation must be held by the Ukrainian side, and these people are about to lose their position. So the situation is critical, but as we can see, Zelensky doesn't have any other option. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 12 hours, the Russians improved their position significantly, especially through the western Zaporizhzhia direction. These days, almost every single day, we adjust the map in the Russian favor. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 14th of July of 2026, and this is the moment when the map has begun being adjusted almost every single day. So these are the changes between the 14th and the 20th of July of 2026. As you can see, we have lots of changes. As of the end of the 20th of July, we don't have updates confirming this progress on the ground. We just have statements and updates published by different reliable sources. And according to these updates, the Russians managed to improve their positions through the entire western flank of the city of Orykhov. At the same time, according to this map and this configuration of the strongholds, the Russians just approached strongholds at several points. The Russians managed to take under complete control several strongholds through this flank, but when talking about the rest of the front line, we see that the Russians just approach, which means that the main battle is just ahead of us. And if Russians are able to take under complete control the main defense and defense line of the western Zaporizhzhia direction, then probably from this direction the Russians would continue their offensive counteroffensive operation further, both in the northern direction and in the eastern direction, with the purpose to outflank the city of Orykhov. Meanwhile, the Russians continue bombing and attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine along the river of Konska to the north of the city of Orykhov with aviation. Everything is ready before the beginning of the main battle for the Zaporizhzhia direction, before the battle for the city of Zaporizhzhia itself. As for the city of Zaporizhzhia, during the previous 12 hours, we received lots of videos how Russians were attacking and destroying locomotives. Lots of videos were published through the entire central and eastern parts of Ukraine, where we can see dozens of locomotives that were attacked by Russians and destroyed, which means that now the Ukrainians are trying to bring additional forces, infantry, troops, vehicles, fuel, missiles, weapons in the direction of the city of Orykhov and further in the eastern direction towards the line of combat contact, and the Russians destroy everything, not allowing the Ukrainians to introduce additional forces and fresh reinforcements in this area. As for the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction, during the previous 12 hours, we haven't received anything special. Most likely the group of forces east continues advancing further in the western direction, trying to take under complete control the villages of Dolinka and the village of Lubetskaya, but as you can see, according to the current situation, no changes on the ground were recorded. Now let's move further and let's talk about the city of Konstantinovka and the Druzhkovka Slaviansk direction. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded to the north of the city of Konstantinovka, and today we start receiving first reports that the Russians answered the settlement of Osykovo with map changes. We start receiving reports that Russians answered the village of Osykovo several days ago, maybe a week ago, but just today we received first changes that were provided by different sources. So the battle for the next stronghold in the Druzhkovka Slaviansk agglomeration has begun. The Russians answered these farms, and the Russians most likely are going to continue advancing further with the purpose to take under complete control of the first buildings and first streets of the city. Furthermore, according to information we have, the main defense belt of the armed forces of Ukraine and the main stronghold of the city is this industrial zone where the Ukrainians are trying to dig in deeper and to meet the main battle for the city itself. Furthermore, according to different sources, the Ukrainians, since the beginning of the battle, of the most important battle of the special military operation, have deployed significant number of forces, battalions, brigades, platoons, and so on in this direction, just with the purpose to slow down the Russians. And telling the truth, maybe this is the reason why why Zelensky was talking with all these commanders, because everybody sees that Syrskyi decided to redeploy everything he has in this direction, and everybody sees this. Everybody understands that if Syrskyi loses the battle for Slaviansk-Druzhkivka, and if the situation in this area will be the same and similar as the situation in the area of the city of Bakhmut, or in the area of the city of Konstantinovka, or in the area of the city of Chasiv Yar, then this can lead to unpredictable consequences. I would like to remind you that, for example, during the battle for the city of Bakhmut, the different sources estimated losses of both the Russians and the Ukrainians around between 20 and 70,000 people. And when talking about the battles for every single city like Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar, and Konstantinovka, these are the approximate estimations. And we need to understand that if we're gonna see the same story through the Slaviansk-Druzhkivka, and first of all, we're talking about the situation when Russians continue improving their positions through the flanks, tightening the news around the main supply lines, like from the south, and of course the similar situation from the north, the Russians would be able to establish complete FPV drone control and different artillery control, sabotage, and reconnaissance group control over the main logistic lines of the armed forces of Ukraine, and this situation can lead to the situation when the approximate losses probably of both the Russians and the Ukrainians Ukrainians at the end of the battle for Druzhkovka, Slaviansk-Kramatorsk could be estimated more than hundreds of thousands of soldiers. You know that? So, and this is the most important situation, because if a party faces losses like this, then if the other party announce mobilization, then basically you will not be able to have additional resources to replace the losses you suffered a week or a month or 2 months ago. So maybe, who knows what exactly is happening, because another important thing that, according to Syrskyi and his statements he made in the past, he was not going to fall back from the cities of Slaviansk and Druzhkovka, and as you can see, according to these reports from the opposite, he concentrated thousands of troops in this area, which means that this is going to be a very difficult battle both for Russians and for the Ukrainians. But the question is, what are we going to see in the end of this battle, and what kind of losses are we going to see, and the most important, who is able to replace and to fulfill the losses faster. And most likely, according to the current situation, the Russians will be able to do this faster if it ever happens. Anyway, the Russians continue offensive. They're getting closer and closer. First reports about first clashes were recorded through the city of Alexeyevka-Druzhkovka. Furthermore, the Russians continue advancing towards the settlement of Nikolaevka and towards its eastern stronghold. We're talking about this multi-story block, which means that the battle for this part is also about to start. As for the Liman direction, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything. We just received several satellite pictures, fresh pictures, where we might see how Russians continued attacking main logistic lines, main bridges and pontoon bridges through this area, trying to reduce and to destroy Ukraine's logistic capabilities. Now let's talk about the northern directions. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes were recorded around the settlement of Bilyi Kolodiaz. And these are the changes on the ground, and this is another important territory. Right now, Syrskyi is trying to collect as many as possible forces through the Slaviansk-Druzhkivka agglomeration, but at the same time, Syrskyi is forced to take these forces from other directions. And according to information we have, Syrskyi is forced to take forces even from the Kharkiv, from the Sumy direction, which means that the Russians began moving faster. And during the previous 24 hours, the group of forces north reported that currently the clashes are taking place along the flanks of the city of Bilyi Kolodiaz for the villages of Shevchenkovo and to the north of the settlement of Bakhmut. If Ukrainians lose control over the settlement of Bilyi Kolodiaz, this is going to be something similar to a breakthrough. If we color all these territories in Russian favor, then we need to understand that most likely the most northeastern parts of Ukraine, we're talking about this territory, about this Kharkiv part of the Kharkiv region, would collapse automatically, and the Ukrainians would be forced to begin retreating from this area towards more reliable positions, or the Ukrainians would be encircled without any chances for evacuation. So the front line in the northeastern parts of the Kharkiv region could collapse any time moment in the future, and the front line could be shifted further in the southern direction, either toward the settlement of Veliki Burluk or even further towards the settlement of Shevchenkovo. But saying the truth, there is a too big gap between Veliki Burluk and Pechenegi water reservoir, and this gap will allow the Russians to outflank the Veliki Burluk from the west and southwest, and from these positions it is going to be very difficult for Ukrainians to defend their lines through this configuration, the front line. So I believe that the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back even further in the southern direction towards the settlement of Shevchenkovo, and the Ukrainians would try to slow down the Russians along the line between Pechenegi water reservoir, the village of Shevchenkovo, and further the river of Seversky Donets. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Sumy direction. During the previous 12 hours, no changes were recorded, but the Russians published lots of videos where we can see how Russians using drones of different types were attacking infrastructure of the city of Sumy, how Russians were attacking gas stations, how Russians were attacking different facilities. As you can see, the Russians have quite good signal. They don't have problems with the picture, which means that the Russians have established strong control over the city of Sumy itself without any chances for the Ukrainian side to change the situation. The Russians control the city of Sumy with drones, and which means that this is already something like the situation when everything that enters the city of Sumy faces the situation of one-way ticket. Probably nothing can leave the city of Sumy anymore because the Russians control the situation, and the Russians continue developing their offensive operation through the entire line of combat contact. Another important thing is that the Russians continue attacking the city of Odesa and the Odesa region. During the previous 24 hours, probably another record of missiles used by Russians was established. The Russians were attacking the city itself, and during the previous 24 hours, we received lots of videos on this matter. Here we have lots of explosions, fires through the settlement. The Russians were attacking facilities, port infrastructure, and the most important thing is that during the previous 24 hours, according to the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, the Russians destroyed a lot of vessels through the Black Sea. Furthermore, the Russians destroyed a lot of vessels on the territory of the port infrastructure of the city of Odesa, and this is a very, very difficult situation because the Ukrainians lose control over the western parts of the Black Sea when talking about commercial purposes, business purposes, and so on. Most likely, the Ukrainians still have possibilities to use the Black Sea for business purposes, for military purposes, but the main value of the city of Odesa was the possibilities to receive military cargo from the Western countries. But now we see that the Ukrainians are losing these possibilities, and everything due to strikes that were carried out by the Ukrainians through the Sea of Azov and the eastern parts of the Black Sea. Another important thing that this evening another reconnaissance aircraft was recorded through the Black Sea, which means that most likely in coming days, maybe between the 20th and the 21st of July of 2026, the Ukrainians would attack infrastructure of Russia through the Krasnodar region. All refineries, warehouses, ammo depots, logistic hubs could be attacked by the Ukrainians during the next 24 hours. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye-bye.